Welcome back to another Squid Games video, where today we will be answering one of the biggest questions I had while watching Season 2. Just like in the first season where we saw the creator of the Squid Games himself, Ilnam, go undercover and pose as a random player so he could play in the games before he passed away, this Season 2, we saw the exact same thing happen but for a different reason. While the old man, Ilnam, seemed to want to play in these games because he was at the end of his life and was simply bored and wanted one more time to play in these childhood games that he once played when he was a little kid. These were the games that the entire competition was modeled around, all the way down to the set for marbles being based off the actual place he grew up as a kid. Instead, in Season 2, Inho, or the frontman, was inserted into this year's games after Red Light Green Light was finished. It seemed like he was on standby in case Gi-hoon decided to try to disrupt the games, which he did multiple times in the first day, and because of that, Inho chose to join the games and once again pose as just another player wearing the same number that Ilnam wore. How Gi-hoon didn't think twice about trusting number 1 again, I will just never understand. Even after the red flags pop up, when Inho slips up and calls him by his name before they tell each other, or how he immediately goes out of his way on day 1 to befriend him, or even when his best friend mentions that something's off with him. For how much the first games traumatized him, Gi-hoon simply throws everything out the window and trusts the frontman with his life and completely believes that he is just another player. But you know what? Before the frontman stepped in, there was a real player 1 that was already in the games. There was a person before Inho that was already player number 1, and after the first game he just disappeared, never to be seen again. You can actually see in the first game when they show the board that player number 1 actually survived Red Light Green Light, which isn't an easy task. In Season 1, out of the 456 players that played the first game, 255 were eliminated. That's 56%, which is a huge number. If you want to know which game is the most dangerous out of all of the games, the last video that went up covers which Squid Games you should 100% avoid if you ever have the choice. It's a really interesting watch, but today I want to know what happened to the real player number 1. I took on the massive challenge of scrubbing frame by frame through the entirety of episode 3 and logging every single player number I could distinguish. This was a huge task and took over 12 hours of staring and counting the same numbers over and over and over and over, just to see if I could actually find who the real player number 1 was. Because if there was a real player number 1 and he did survive Red Light Green Light, what did they do to him? Did they give him a small percentage of the reward money as compensation for beating the first game and then send him home? Or did they simply execute him on the spot and take him downstairs to the incinerator and then send the frontman into the games in his place? Or what if there never was a player 1? Who's to say that all the players are actually even in the games? I was a little curious, so not only did I go through the whole episode and log all the players' numbers I could find, but I also took every wide-angle shot that the majority of the players are visible in and did head counts, just to see if the reason I couldn't find a certain player was because there wasn't actually 456 players in the games, which would be interesting for a number of reasons. And surprisingly enough, only 5% of the people that watched the last video were actually subscribed. That's such a small number, guys. What are you doing? Just go down there and smash that button if you think Gi-hoon should have been a little more suspicious of player number 1. As we get closer to Season 3 of Squid Games, we're going to be making more fun videos that you're not going to want to miss out on, so make sure you're subscribed. Now, like I was saying, where is player number 1? I sat down and went through the entirety of the Red Light Green Light episode. Once you get rid of the scenes following Junho and the captain searching for the games, you have 50 minutes focused on the actual games themselves. Then if you take away all the scenes that don't show any players, like the frontman shots, the guards, and all the close-ups on Gi-hoon, you are left with a whopping 28 minutes worth of player shots. And so I started. I sat down, took each shot, zoomed in as much as I could, and wrote down all the different player numbers I could find. It may seem easy at first glance, but some of these shots are just a second or two long and have 100 different players visible. You count all of these and then cut to a shot slightly angled that has the same players but different ones are visible, and you just do the same thing over and over and over again. And from when Gi-hoon wakes up for the first time until the end of Red Light Green Light, there's 300 of these shots. This turned out to be an extremely slow and droning process, but by the end of it, I was surprised at what it revealed. Now, by the end of the first scene where the players are being introduced to the games, you can see the numbers of 255 individual players. By the end of Red Light Green Light, there is a ton of other players in front of the camera, and I could see 364 specific players. And then including the voting at the end, the entire episode has 388 players that I could distinguish, which means that 15% of the overall player base of the 456 players, I was never able to see their numbers. And could you guess who I wasn't able to find in all 300 of these shots? Yup, that's right, player number 1. There was 68 players I couldn't find, and would you look at that, number 1 is nowhere to be seen. Where on earth is he? Did he even exist? What if the game said 456 players were in here, but there was only 455 players? Because who's gonna take a head count or notice that there's one player missing? So that's what I had to do next, was take a head count. Unfortunately, there's never a good shot of every single player visible, but you know what? There's some wide-angle shots that have just about all the players in them, and so as long as I could count around 450 or 45, that would suffice. I thought I would start with this shot in the room with the bunk beds just because of how perfect everyone is lined up. You can literally see all of their faces, and it seems to have just about all of them in it, minus a couple on the sides. I got to counting and found only 288 visible players here. What the heck? That's not even remotely close to 456 players. Where's the other 40% of the players? You're telling me there's 170 people on the sides of this shot, under the bunk beds, or I don't know, using the bathroom, or just standing behind someone? This was a tad concerning to me, so I moved on to the red light, green light shots. Unfortunately, there's no perfect shot, but some of these seem a little promising. I mean, it definitely seems like the majority is in this shot, but when I counted everyone up, I only found 300 players. That's still 150 short. This was not going as planned. I thought I would keep searching and found the very best angle I could see. While there is obviously some players still out of the frame, it seems like the vast majority is in the shot. Plus, the far right seems to thin out with players, and it just feels like this is almost everyone. I counted through these and found quite a few more. There is 354 players in this shot, which, while it is much better than 300 and there's still 15 or so off screen to the right, there's still 80 players missing. Was there not even close to 456 players in these games? I went back to season 1 and counted in this shot just to see how many there were, and there was only 290. There's a couple off screen, but still, that's close to only 300. So I was curious and took to sources other than the show itself. Netflix made a game show with 456 real contestants that competed in all the same games, and just look at these shots. You can see how big 456 players actually looks like. They tried to match the show's field as close as possible, but it seems so much more crowded because there's actually 456 people here. Compared to the 300 people we see in the show, you can really tell how big of a difference it is. I mean, even Mr. Beast, when he had 456 people play red light, green light, you can see here that it looks like there's so many more people in these shots. Does this mean there's 100 people that don't play in red light, green light? It could just be that they only wanted to use 350 people to film in the actual scenes because 450 might be too many, I guess. But there's theories going around that more people than just Ilnam and Inho were secret players that are actually VIPs. Some people think that player number 388 was a little sus not being seen in the first game of Red Light Green Light. He's a main character in Season 2. We saw a lot of them get screen time, and is this the only one that doesn't? I went through my notes, and I actually never saw player 388 in the entirety of episode 3. The first time we see him is in the next episode, close to when Inho comes over and befriends Gi-hun. This is extremely sus. There's theories that player 149 is a VIP. She is the only known player to be able to sneak a weapon into the games. We know that the VIPs and special players have fail-safes everywhere to ensure their safety. Ilnam was the person that stopped the Midnight Riot in Season 1 when he felt unsafe. He was the only player in Tug of War that didn't have a lock on his shackles in case his team lost. When he was killed off in Marbles, it was in a secluded area that no one else could see. In Season 2, Inho, the frontman, was in the last team to go in the pentathlon just in case for some reason their team failed. Because then the guards could kill everyone off in the room except for him and maybe Gi-hun if they wanted to keep him alive, and no one else would ever know. It's extremely plausible that if 149 is a VIP, the hairpin weapon would be one of her safeguards. There's theories that a couple other of these players are also VIPs. But what if this is true, and there's a ton of special players that don't play in Red Light Green Light that contributes to the smaller player base? I do wonder because if you look closely at the player picture for number 1, it kind of almost looks like Inho. What if they intentionally used a player with similar looks so they could swap them out if needed? I'm sure that Inho knew going into this game with Gi-hun returning that things would definitely be different. For all we know, this could be the first time ever that a returning player has come back and willingly wanted to play in the games. Who knows what could go wrong? We constantly see how prepared they are for things going wrong and how quickly they handle them. Even with the GPS tracker and Gi-hun's tooth, they were extra thorough in their check this year thanks to the captain who tipped them off. I doubt they're taking any chances with Gi-hun wanting revenge on the games. I'm sure that the frontman knew that if Gi-hun started disrupting this year's games, he personally would have to step in and fix the problem himself. I'm just genuinely surprised with how far Gi-hun got, even though Inho was next to him the entire time. Now, as I was researching for this video, I found something really interesting. The whole first game of Red Light Green Light, we were questioning what happened to the real Player 1. The frontman who becomes Player 1 after the second game is still in the control room during the first game, and there is an actual Player 1 with his picture on the player board, meaning that there is a random person that was Player 1 for one game. And they actually survived that game. And then since the frontman saw how much Gi-hun was disrupting the games, he inserted himself into the games after Red Light Green Light to do damage control, leading us to believe that they must have shot and incinerated the original Player 1. It seems like they got someone with similar looks to Inho so they could swap him out and no one would know the difference. This looks like a middle-aged man with this part in his hair right here. Other than that, we know nothing else. Now, since the focus of Season 2 is on the players and the games and less on the behind the scenes compared to Season 1, they rarely show the player board this season. Besides the couple times they show it during the first game, I only found one other moment you can see the majority of the players, and if we zoom and enhance, we can see that this is actually Inho's player picture. And compare it to the player picture from before Red Light Green Light, we can see it's the exact same, which means that Inho was planning on playing in the games besides Gi-hun before the games even started, and he simply chose not to play in the first game. This is literally the exact same picture, and here he's smiling, playing the character of just another player. This is so crazy that he was planning on going into the games before Gi-hun took control of the first game and saved so many more players from elimination. This is crazy. I guess that means at least they never unfairly discarded the real Player 1, but it still surprises me that they knew before the game started that he would play in them. While this does put to rest the theory that they got rid of a random player before Inho joined, it still leaves a bunch of new questions opened, like why is there 100 players missing from Red Light Green Light each year? And how many of those are VIPs or special players actually playing in the games each year? Plus, I really hope we get some context to Inho's time playing in the games this year. I can't wait for him to come face to face with Gi-hun as the frontman and for his true identity to be revealed. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss out, and I will see you in the comments. Peace.